These are the crabapple cuttings that I brought back from South Dakota. And as you may recall in the last episode, if you watched the last episode, this one had started to bloom, and now the blossoms are fading and they're going to fall off soon. It does have a little bit of leaf, but there's actually a total of 6 cuttings here. Like I said, three big ones and 3 little ones, and they've all started to leaf out. Here's the biggest leaves over here on this one. So I've them leafing out. I don't know for sure if they're rooting because I haven't pulled them out. They may not be. So I guess I'll just have to wait and see. But, you know, they survived this long. They're actually leafing out, so that's something. And this one has gone from flowers to, I think that's a leaf right there, just starting. At least I hope it is. I don't know when I'll get around to airing this. Might be the February show, but this is mid-January when I'm filming it. And today, my mission I've assigned to myself is to move a fig tree. One of the fig trees, this is the one, there's one back here that a year or two ago in one of the episodes, there's a big chunk of a tree here that fell down and smashed this guy to the ground. And the other problem this one has is he's kind of down here in a hole, and this one, the big one here, leaves out in the summer, of course. This will be all covered with leaves. And he doesn't get a lot of light. So the goal for today is to move that tree out over here someplace. I'll have to miss, we've got the satellite dish here on a pole now, and there's a cable that goes directly from it to the house. So I have to be careful of that. The water lines and the electric and all that phone, all that kind of stuff, they come underneath the driveway and along the edge of the driveway there, so there's no problem. I don't have to worry about that here. I've had that staked before to make sure that I didn't, you know, dig up something dangerous. But I do know there's just a single cable here, so I'll miss that. I'll come over here, probably come over here and do that. So I'm going to start by digging a hole and getting some compost, and then I'll be moving the tree. I might use the dirt to fill in a little bit around. This is kind of a low spot anyway, so I'll work on. Okay, there's the hole. I'm kind of digging into the side of the hill here, so one end's deeper than the other. You can see by the color of the soil that it's mostly the clay that we have here. There is a rule of thumb, and I didn't bother to look it up, on when you move a tree, how you want to make the hole wide and shallow, basically, most of the time. And there's a rule based on the width, the diameter of the tree trunk, how big the hole has to be. But I didn't bother to look it up because this little guy is what, like maybe 1 inch in diameter, so he's not very big, so I shouldn't have to worry too much about that. Okay, old saying, plant them high, they won't die, plant them low, they won't grow. So basically he's planted in at about, that's the height the soil was before. So his soil line is just slightly above the ground level. And I backfilled the hole. I'm going to go get some water, although the soil here is plenty damp. And he's mostly dormant this time of year. I mean, this will eventually be a bud, but it's barely started, and it really shouldn't be budding out this time of year anyway. And then back in there is the hole where it came from. I'll dump some soil back in there, and I'll call it good. Well, I can't blame the previous owner for these because I planted these fig trees here. When I was first planting them, I thought that was a good spot back there. It got more sun. But since that time, this front fig tree got really big, and I can cut back this Mexican orange here, and then the what's this called? It's a native plant that gets big white flowers early spring. Shoot, I'll think of it. But anyway, it's grown up pretty tall too, which kind of helps. And in the house blocks the early morning sun here. So one thing about landscaping and gardening, don't be afraid to admit that you made a mistake. Go in and fix it. And hopefully that's what I've done here. I'm going to have to come in here and water this one now, this spring, more than I would normally would. I normally give these guys maybe a drink a couple times in the summer, but they tend to be pretty drought tolerant, and they're in kind of a low spot anyway. So what I've got here is the varieties. These three are Desert King. This big one, which is the one that's been giving us figs. This middle one here, which is going to probably be ready to start giving us figs this year. And then that new one that I just planted, it's not really new, but I just planted him there. Hopefully he'll be ready in a year or two. And this little guy here in the foreground is a Turkish brown. Now we get, in our grocery store, we get local figs, and the ones we normally get are the Desert King. They're the green figs. The Turkish brown or brown figs, we get those too. It seems to me this one was a little more, sample size of one, so who knows. But in my experience, this one was a little bit more cold sensitive. Yeah, it was cold sensitive in that the first year I had it, the frost just about killed it back to the ground. So it's been a very slow, this little Turkish brown right here, which comes up just a little bit past my knee, was planted the same year that this one here was planted, and it's, I'm up to my chin basically now. So, but, this is a mock orange, the native mock orange back here. I was going to mention maybe one or two other things today. It's kind of a misty morning, but the sun's breaking out. It's not cold out really. In fact, we had record-breaking heat the last couple of days. Those pinkish berries right there, that's a snowberry. I have two snowberries. This is a variety that gets pink fruit and still has some berries on it. The other one back there has white fruit, and the berries are all gone, so I suspect birds have gotten to them. I've noticed that my huckleberries are all gone too, and I got a few of them, but I left most of them for the birds. This is one plant of several that I have that bears pretty good heavy huckleberries, and it's there's one huckleberry right there. Well, the birds don't want it. I guess there's two there. I'll take one as a toll. Not bad. What was I coming up here for? I was coming up here for a reason. Oh, and I remember. So these are Mahonia, also known as Oregon grape. I've talked about them many times. I have several. And one way you can tell on a stem, I pulled a stem off here as I had pruned a little earlier, the leaves are opposite on the stem. In other words, there's a leaf that grows at exactly the same spot on each side of the stem. We have another plant that has prickly leaves. They're green. That's an invasive, and that's the holly. And you can tell that readily because its leaves are staggered. It gets red fruit, and then the birds spread the fruit around the forest, and then once a year or so I get to go around with my pruners and try to find them and hack them off before they get too big. And the reason for that is it's an invasive. They'll take over. I don't want them in my forest. I'm talking about holly, not the Oregon grape. And the birds will readily spread them like they spread lots of things. So it's just pretty much a constant. I'm looking to see if I cut some back in here last summer, and I was just looking around here to see if I see any, and I don't see any. So I think I must have got them. Probably it's one of those things. The holly is like a plant where if you keep after it, and keep hacking on it, it'll eventually just give up and die. Maybe I'm hoping that's the plan, because they're kind of hard to pull, and I'm not going to use poison, so cutting them back is like my number one solution. Here's another evergreen huckleberry, and this is the red little red huckleberry down here, which this time of year has no leaves on it. But those get red huckleberries. One of the few red berries is probably safe to eat. There's a red huckleberry right there too. Here now, I think we're getting more and more. It's a second growth forest, and over the decades since this was logged, we're starting to get more and more ground covers. The native ground covers, the salal like this, which gets a dark purple berry, which I don't see any here because the animals have probably got them all. The huckleberry, the two huckleberries, the salal, some of the other plants, the mahonia, and of course the invasives like that blackberry right there, which I'll chop back. I try to keep after those, and that gets me more birds. Now I made a mistake last night. I forgot to bring in the bird feeders. I've been bringing them in because we've had a bear in our neighborhood in the last year or two, and bears do like bird feeders. And also that little house feeder over there is a little platform feeder I added this year. I got pulled down one night, I think probably by a raccoon, because it wasn't broken or anything. It was just laying on the ground where the raccoon had left it. So I've got, hello chickadee, I've got two old tube feeders here that have these cones which keep the squirrel from crawling up the pole. I've got one here that has no cone, but it's the type where the squirrel grabs onto it, it shuts it. But if a bird lands there, it doesn't shut. There's my new suet feeder that replaces the old one. This one is a little bit more upscale than my old one. Has a removable recycled plastic lid and a recycled body. It's got like a little tail rest here for the woodpecker or whatever. And so these three here I fill with black oil sunflower, and then I just added this little feeder, and I put it back here because I was hoping that, and I did notice a squirrel in the other day. I was hoping to attract the squirrel and keep him away from the birds. Not that the birds seem too scared of him. Yeah, it's empty now because I didn't fill it today because I forgot to left it out. This has a little water shield over it, and the bottom of the platform is a mesh, so if any water gets in there, it can drain out, and it's easy to wash out. And I just hung that there on the tree. And then, of course, I've got my bird bath, which they don't care too much about this time of year because there's water everywhere, but they do take a bath there in the summer sometimes. So that's going to be the end of my show, I think, for mid-January. I might call it February, but it's not February yet. But I think I'll call it the end of the show. So see you next